Right, let's go ahead and get started. Jossie, if you want to go ahead and start recording. Okay, welcome to the Lunch and Learn for April 2025. This month's Lunch and Learn, I wanted to talk a little bit about sensory evaluation and how we use it more specifically in the winery. And when we do a workshop that we've been doing here at the Institute for many years, if you've been, we call it the tasting workshop or the sensory workshop, but I think we call it the intensive tasting proficiency training. And if you've ever attended that training, I think it's a good training. We go through a lot of different activities. We smell a lot. We taste a lot. We talk a lot about what we're experiencing, but we do it in a more general sense. And so I really wanted to take time today to go over how, as winemakers and as wine production people, we should be approaching sensory evaluation, because it's slightly different than how, as a consumer, you might approach evaluating your wine. So let's jump in here, and I will go over some basics, because some of you haven't taken that or that workshop, or everyone needs a refresher. We will offer that again. It's a one-day workshop in July, probably late July sometime. And yeah, lots of people come back and redo it with us and do some retraining. And I think it's a good one. I mean, we've been doing it for many years and we consistently get some good feedback. So let's jump into, though, using sensory evaluation in the winery during the wine production stages. So let's get my slides to work here. So what is sensory evaluation? It's where we're going to use all of our senses, every single one, all 5 of them, to evoke, measure, analyze, interpret the characteristics of food. You could do a sensory evaluation with all foods, okay? It doesn't have to be wine, doesn't have to be a beverage. And you're going to, and all of the ways that we're going to use our senses are done in a very similar way, right? We have a stimulus. So if this example highlights how you would look at a glass of wine or a sample of wine, you have the stimulus, the light enters your eyes and hits the receptors. Your receptors are attached to neurons, which send a signal to your brain. Your brain interprets what those receptors are, what they're being stimulated with. And based on your previous experience, your brain puts out an output, an evaluation, a recognition. And so that's why a lot of times we are basing our sensory evaluation on previous things that have happened to us, and previous smells that we know, previous tastes that we know. Okay, so the one thing I will make a note about right now, I'm going to be talking about sight, smell, taste, touch today. Hearing, it's obviously not quite as important when you are evaluating food and beverage and wine. But you may want to be in a quiet place so that it isn't distracting you from using your other senses. So that's how I'll kind of deal with hearing at this point. We don't need to use it to evaluate wine. So you want to try and not have it be a distracting element. Proper technique. So I wanted to put this up here, and I won't talk about it too much, but this is the proper technique to taste wine as a professional, okay? And I think as a consumer, I would teach people to taste wine like this as well. But I would say as a professional, this is absolutely how you need to be tasting wine. You evaluate the color first and foremost. You hold it up against something that is white, okay? Beige is not appropriate. Your beige cabinets in your winery are not appropriate. You need to evaluate color against a white background. I would highly recommend, if you have a little lab where things can get wet and whatnot, get a white piece of paper laminated. And that way you've always got a tasting sheet that you can be, evaluating your color against. You want to sniff the wine quickly. And then just to detect if there's any faults, swirl. If you have some issues with swirling, I don't have a wine glass. Well, I do. Just one sec. All kinds of interesting things in my office. If you don't have the really great technique, okay, for swirling, put it against a table. Put your glass against a table and swirl against a table. Okay, you need to release those volatile components so that they can get out of the wine and into your nose. That is how you're going to smell them. They cannot be smelled if they're in the wine. So you got to get them out. So swirl, sniff, record your aromas. Okay, you should be making notes when you are doing any sensory evaluation. And take as much time as you need. There's no right or wrong. There's some different techniques you might see out there. I don't really know why, to be honest with you, but I smell kind of one side, tilt the other side. Some people take 3 good sniffs and take a little break and write down what they're perceiving. So spend some time with aroma. Then you're going to take a small sip. Okay. When you take a small sip, half an ounce, a little bit less than a half ounce, you want to move that liquid all around your mouth. There are taste receptors, touch receptors all over the mouth, not just on the tongue, especially the touch receptors. And to get the proper perception of the wine, you want to be moving it all around your mouth. Also sucking in a little bit of air to volatilize those aroma compounds for retronasal aromas. Okay, that's where we get some of our flavor. That's where you get other aromas being released as you're doing that. So I'll just do a quick demonstration with my water. It looks kind of barbaric. You might not want to do it as a consumer if you're at a nice restaurant or something. As a winemaker, do it. Okay, this is your job. You've got to get that wine in there, swirl it all around, release those aromas, and see what's happening in your wine. I will say, I just drank that because it was water. When you are in a professional setting, you need to expectorate the wine. Okay, have a sink nearby, have a cup nearby. That is the professional way to do it. You spit out the wine, you get all of the tastes and aftertastes and flavors and whatever that you need. The professional way to evaluate wine is to spit it out. Okay, there's how you do proper tasting. I do go over it in the workshop, but I'm sure you can find lots of YouTube videos as well online about how to properly evaluate. But remember, I'm coming at this from a winemaking standpoint, not from a consumer standpoint. Okay, so let's jump into the different senses and how we're going to use them. And just as a kind of a quick reminder, when you are evaluating visual, okay, against that white background, there's 3 things: intensity, hue, and clarity. Those are the 3 things you should be writing down in your notes. And you can get a template. Download a template for all of your sensory analysis, and it'll help guide you as you go through it. So the intensity is the darkness or lightness. The hue is going to be the real color of the wine, whether it's more, so for reds, you're looking at more purple reds versus more orange reds or brick reds, and everything kind of in between there. White, almost colorless to amber color, and everything in between there. I put on here some of the words that I like to use. These not necessary. Let me get a laser pointer here. Not necessary for you to use these exact words like brick, ruby, garnet, straw, gold, but use and find other words to describe the wine. Okay. Not just, oh, it's red. What kind of red? What hue of red are we talking about? And then clarity, how clear a wine is. Okay. And you can go all the way from brilliant, usually in white wines. We talk sometimes about wines being brilliant, kind of like diamonds is how I would, if it's really shiny and sparkly, I guess. Clear, hazy, opaque. So I found this picture, and this is how I would label the two wines: dark purple red and opaque. Okay, I can't see through that. Doesn't mean there's faulted, okay, but I cannot see through this particular wine on the left. And the wine on the right, light to medium. To me, this is red. This is kind of the middle of the road red, and clear. You may want to make a note about the edges as well. You can evaluate that when you're evaluating color. Okay, to move on to aroma. Aroma is probably, I won't say it's the most important, but it's extremely important when it comes to evaluating wine. So spend some time doing this. It's also the one I think people need to spend the most time practicing, because there are thousands of different descriptors you can use in the aroma world. When it comes to taste, or when it comes to visual, there's not as many descriptors. Okay, it's a little bit more simple to describe. But aromas, we've got every smell you can possibly imagine that you might want to use. Remember that there's orthonasal, right up the nose, okay, versus retronasal, which is up the back of your mouth. You don't want to take the wine up the back of your mouth, right? You are just releasing those aromas. They will find their way up there, okay? You need to release them, and that's why agitation in the mouth is good, but that will release them so that they can find your nose receptors, your aroma receptors in your nose. There's lots of aroma compound classes. There's terpenes, esters, sulfur-containing compounds, alcohols. They're all volatile. They're all in the gas form. If you can smell them, that means a gas molecule got into your nose. Remember as well, when we're talking about aromas, you can have primary aromas, which are in the fruit from the get-go. Secondary aromas are from the fermentation. The yeast or the bacteria that you used did something to create that aroma compound. And tertiary aromas come about from something that happened during the aging process. That might be in bottle, it might be in barrel, and it might be in tank. It might be sur lie. So if you leave the lees in contact and stir those up every once in a while, something that you did post fermentation that created a new aroma. Okay. A lot of faults are tertiary aromas. Okay. You didn't necessarily mean for them to happen, but they came about sometime after fermentation. If you don't have a copy of the Wine Aroma Wheel, I highly recommend finding a copy. I would also recommend purchasing a copy. It was academics that came up with this. They really don't charge very much for them, and they are copyrighted. Okay, Anne Noble, that came up with the Wine Aroma Wheel, has copyrighted the Wine Aroma Wheel, so please respect that. But use that. It's a really great tool. It's especially as you are practicing and honing in your aroma skills, your smelling skills, it helps guide you to evaluating your wines. And there's nobody, why not use it? Okay, it's a valuable tool. When it comes to aromas as well, practice, practice, practice. Smell everything you can. Go to the grocery store and smell everything you can. You might seem weird, but everything you have in your house, everything, especially as the world is blooming again, smell as many different things as you can. And I don't mean just foods. Smell the grass. Smell what the grass really smells like. It will help you to unconfuse different aromas. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Smell everything you can. The other thing I'm going to say is when you are doing your, this goes for kind of in general, when you're doing sensory evaluation and you're making notes, maybe you're talking to some of your employees and explaining to them, make sure you're using words that they can understand, that if you're writing notes for just yourself, maybe there's something specific that you want to use that only you really understand what you mean. Maybe it's a reference to a baked good that somebody used to make, or a fruit that you smelled in another country, or something like that. But be careful, because if you go and try and explain to somebody what you are perceiving and they don't know what that word means, what that smell is, you're going to confuse them. So you need to develop a lexicon, a group of words as you are describing wines, that consumers can understand, your employees can understand. And so just be aware of that and be careful of that. Okay, and the last thing I just wanted to say is flavor is a mixed sensation from both aroma and taste. Okay, it has to do with that retronasal aroma and the tastes that are happening in the mouth at the same time. So it's a complex sensation that is a mixture of aroma and taste. Okay, so let's move on to taste and touch, which are in your mouth. Okay, after you put that wine in there, there's only 5 tastes possible, right? There's bitter, sweet, salty, sour, umami. We do talk about salty and umami, not as much do we talk about them in wine. Maybe a little umami. It's and that's that savoriness. But bitter, sweet, sour, definitely tastes that we talk about with wine. There is a tongue map out there. It's still circulating, and it has been debunked a little bit. You can taste sweet all over your tongue, okay? Not just the tip. You can taste bitter all over your tongue, not just at the back. But when your tongue is saturated and working really hard, so for example, at the tasting workshop we do, by the end of the day, people are exhausted. Trust me, I am exhausted as well. My mouth is exhausted, my tongue is exhausted. At that point, we might be better describing bitterness when it hits the back of our tongue, because there are more bitterness sensors there, and our tongue has been working really hard that day and is kind of saturated and is fatigued. So keep that in mind. You can taste sweetness everywhere, salty everywhere, sour everywhere. It's just that when you're overstimulated, let's say, these are the places where they are more concentrated receptors. What else did I want to talk? I wanted to talk a little bit about touch receptors, because that is actually really important in wine. We don't usually think of it when we're doing a sensory evaluation, but again, as winemakers, you should think of it. There's temperature, touch, pain, and pressure that are all touch not motor. What was I going to say? But they're all touch receptors in your mouth. So where does that come into wine evaluation? Temperature, for sure. That's kind of an easy one. And it may be that you're holding a wine at a really cold temperature. You may want to allow that to come up to 60 degrees or room temperature before you evaluate it. Okay, really cold can be very difficult, or can give you a different perception. Astringency with tannins, and so those drying sensations, it's kind of like licking felt, or if you drink really strong coffee or tea, it's that drying sensation that's left behind. Alcohol can have a touch perception, because as it evaporates, it can create, the way I describe high alcohol is usually it's hot, not temperature hot, but that it is evaporating quickly in my mouth, and giving giving a hot perception. It's actually quite a cold perception because it's evaporating and taking the heat away from your mouth. But it's I usually use the word hot, and maybe that's a bad one to use when we have high alcohol in wines. And then the last one is bubbles. Bubbles is you can definitely taste those, not taste them, but you can perceive those with your touch receptors on your tongue and all over the rest of your mouth. And whether the bubbles, you can describe the bubbles. Are they fine? Are they large? Are they lingering? Are they, and that can be a way to describe your wines as well. One thing I wanted to talk about quickly is taste interactions. So there's a lot of work done in the food science world about taste interactions and how different components can interact with each other and not interact with each other, but how your brain interprets it. So a good example that we talk about in the wine world a lot, I always say sugar tends to balance out acidity. We use sugar a lot in the Midwest because we have higher acid wines, and sometimes we use it to balance out some of that acidity. Well, the correct way to explain this is that sweet suppresses sour. Okay, and so you can see the map over here. Sweet towards sour suppresses sour. Okay, so So I use the word balance, and in this scientific paper, they're using the word suppresses. Bitter, on the other hand, enhances sour. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you are getting a bitter sensation, you may be enhancing the sourness of that wine. Might not be what you are going for. Salty and sour, which again, I know we don't usually do talk about salty a lot, but salty and sour enhance each other. So just something to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about food pairing as well. If you don't want to bring out that acidity, maybe a salty food to pair it with isn't the best one. Okay, there's lots of factors though when it comes to food and wine pairing, but a couple of things to think about. Okay, finish and overall perceptions of the wine. Aromas, flavors, tastes, sensations, they linger. Okay, so do not, as soon as you spit the wine out, go, okay, that was it. No, sit with it for a second and think, okay, what else am I getting? What else, jotting things down as the aftertaste is progressing. Okay, is it long? Is it short? Is there a bitterness? Is it a certain flavor that you're getting on the aftertaste? And in the winemaking process, I guess I'll talk about this in a second. Why are you evaluating all of these things? Because you might need to do something about some of them. Okay, before you release this to your consumers, you might like it. You might want to hold on to it and guard that perception, or you might want to decrease it because it's not what you want it's not what you want your consumers to have in their wine. So always evaluate a finish. The other thing I wanted to share was an idea that I heard from a very famous winemaker who actually has some Iowa roots. Her name is Heidi Barrett. She's the winemaker at Screaming Eagle, so cult winery in Napa Valley. Her father is actually from Pleasant Hill in Iowa. When she is blending wines, she goes through and she tastes what she has in all of her tanks or barrels or whatnot. And she breaks it up into 6 components. 1 and 2 are the beginning of the tasting. 3 and 4 is what she gets from, these are all in the mouth, by the way. 1 and 2 at the beginning when she just puts it in her mouth. 3 and 4 in the middle. 5 and 6 towards the end and probably the finish. And when she is blending, she knows what she's looking for a wine. So if she wants a wine to be a lot of 3, a lot of 4, really good mid palate. Okay, lots of 3 and 4. She tastes a wine and goes, this has a lot of 5 and 6. Not, might not be correct for that wine. But she works with the wines that she has available to figure out, how do I craft the wine that is balanced and the wine that I'm looking for. And so she breaks it up so it's manageable. And she can go, this wine has good 1, 2. This wine has good, 3. This wine over here has good 5, 6. Now, how do we want to put these things together? And I just thought it was really an interesting way to uncomplicate blending of wines and uncomplicate sensory evaluation. You might think it's complicating it, but I actually think that it helps to, so you're not just writing down flavors and aromas all the time, but you're thinking about it in terms of how the consumer is going to interact with that wine. So just a thought, but I just thought it was a really interesting technique. Okay, where do these contributions from sensory come from? Vineyard techniques. If any of you have attended the Iowa Wine Growers or the Iowa Specialty Producers Conference in the last couple of years, Randall and I have been talking about this for a while. There are things you can do in the vineyard to enhance certain flavors in the winery. And that could be just hanging your fruit on the vine longer. And it could be exposure to sunlight. Now, opening up your canopy is also good for pest management. And whereas hanging your fruit on the vine might actually be maybe bad for pest management because you're leaving it on there for a longer time, risk is higher. But remember that your aroma development and those delicate, small concentration type aromas are coming at the end of the development. Okay. And I know people, schedules get in the way, rain gets in the way. Sometimes you just have to pick, pests get in the way, and you just have to get that fruit off. But remember, the longer you do leave fruit on the vine, various aromas can develop. Sometimes not always good, right? Edelweiss Brianna, we don't like leaving that on the vine too long because it gets foxy. But so again, I give you this information to get you to start thinking about how you want to develop your wines and what kinds of aromas you are trying to go for to make you more thoughtful winemakers. Yeast also majorly contribute to the aroma contribution or to the aromas during the fermentation. There's a lot of stuff going on in the yeast. They don't just take sugar and convert it to alcohol. Okay, there's a lot of other biotransformations that they have going on, and a lot of those things that they spit out of their cells after those biotransformations are smelly. They have an aroma to them. And so choosing your yeast is an important factor. Take your catalog, your website, whichever's your preferred supplier, and sit with it and see and read, oh, this one's going to give me good esters, or this one's going to give me good release of terpenes that are in the grapes. If you need help in terms of knowing which ones would be great for which varieties, contact the reps for those companies, or feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely help sort you through what it is you're reading and what you want to be what your goals are for your wines. And then cellaring operations. There's everything you do post fermentation has an impact on your wine, and chances are you don't really want to have much of an impact in a sensory sense. Okay, you have grown the grapes all summer. You have fermented them now into from juice into wine. You're probably sitting pretty good with all of the aromas that are in there. And so the cellaring operations, you want to make sure you're holding on to a lot of those aromas and you're preserving them and protecting them. Okay, So you probably will want to filter, okay, or fine to clarify visually, improve the wine. Fining agents can also help improve color, aroma, taste if you do want to tweak anything. And I'm also going to say good sanitation and limited oxygen exposure is going to preserve your color, your aroma, and the tastes that you have developed in your wine. Okay, so in the winery, what do I recommend? So you're approaching this in a different way. There are times you are all consumers, okay, and you're tasting wine for a pleasurable reason. In the winery, you need to approach it from a different perspective. Okay, it's not about whether you like the wine or not. You should like your own wines, but you should have a much more critical view of them. So I recommend, I know this is difficult to do, and I don't always take my own advice, but taste at all cellar operations. So if you're moving a wine, you're racking it, you're filtering it, taste your wine. It's the best time to do it. You're already moving it. You've probably got wine in my student always takes the dredges that are in a bucket if we're filtering and things are spraying out of the filter, or we're racking and there's a little bit left in the hose. He always takes a bucket. Make sure you know what's in your bucket, and he always takes a sip. Not necessarily, maybe not doing that, but I appreciate that he wants to know what the wine tastes like at this moment in time. So I highly recommend tasting at all cellar operations regularly. I would say bi-weekly is a good time. I know that's a lot. Monthly at the very least. I would recommend taking a sample, take a small sample, put it in a little sample tube, and sit in a quiet, non-distracting environment. Okay. When we're doing things in the cellar or in the winery, especially at the end of the day, things are chaotic when we're cleaning. Water's flying everywhere, and we're kind of frantic to get everything done. And I don't think that's always the greatest time to taste. Taste when things are quiet, when you have a minute. There's no reason not to taste first thing in the morning. If you just drank a coffee, maybe give yourself a minute. But tasting in the morning is fine. I tend to be sharper in the morning. Grapes and juice, remember that aroma compounds develop last. Also, you can taste a juice, and there are a lot of aromas that you will not be able to taste because they have not been released. They might be bound to sugars, or they might be made during the fermentation. So as much as we say taste your juice and see where it's at, it's hard to say what your final wine is exactly going to be. But there should be marker aromas that will help you determine if it's ripe or not. But remember, you are going to get lots of aromas developing during the fermentation. During the fermentation, you should be taking a sample daily to check the bricks and the temperature. Give it a taste, give it a smell. Make sure nothing untoward is developing, right? Look for signs of struggling fermentation. Is there acetic happening? Is there some H2S going on? You want to remedy those things as quickly as possible. If you get banana, it's totally normal. It's probably one of the more prominent, one of the more potent aromas that comes from the yeast. It's normal, but it does usually dissipate after the fermentation. Post-fermentation. So I would, if you can, I would work into, or work up to, I should say, evaluating biweekly. And again, you maybe monthly. Monthly, you should be taking samples for hopefully to check your SO2 or your acetic acid. And so if you're checking those things monthly, no reason why you couldn't take a little taste of your wine at that point. But look for signs of spoilage. Look for signs of acetic acid, sulfur compounds, and just generally other spoilage and faults. And on that note, what are some of those spoilage and faults? There's microbial faults, there's chemical faults. Okay, so this is why you need to be tasting. It's not all about, oh, I have good sanitation and I have the right amount of SO2 in there. I'm good. There's stuff that could be happening that you are not aware of. Okay, taste your wine. Here's the other reason to taste. It is cheap, okay, or easy, I would say. It's cheap and easy. Your nose is extremely sensitive. Your taste buds, your nose, extremely sensitive, even compared to the analytical instruments we have here in the lab. You do a much better job than those instruments. And it's fast. It's incredibly fast. By the time you analyze it in the lab, in your own lab, or send us a sample to analyze, you could be having all kinds of other problems. Use sensory evaluation as your first line of defense. So, some of the things you should be looking for. And you want to be very hypersensitive to these things, because if you don't correct it quickly in the vineyard, it's going to be a major problem for the consumer. Okay, so you want to be really sensitive to these things and pick them up at their earliest stages. So some of these things are oxidation, volatile acidity, which is vinegar, or long enough it can start smelling like nail polish and solvent. Lactic spoilage. Brettanomyces is a yeast that causes a lot of nasty things in our wine, nasty smells like barnyard and manure and wet dog and things like that. Volatile sulfur compounds. So if you get rotten egg, rubber, garlic and onion, don't splash rack it and think, oh, I'm just going to get this off of here, especially after the wine is post-fermentation. Okay, during fermentation, if you get rotten egg, a little bit of splashing, a little bit of oxygen. But post-fermentation, do not splash your wine if you are having volatile sulfur compounds. You'll make it worse. And cork taint, that is something that it's not just corks. Oak can be a contributor to cork taint. It's just this musty basement. Wet newspaper is the easiest way to describe it. How do you prevent any of these things? Only use clean fruit. Only bring in clean fruit. If you smell acetic acid in your fruit before you start fermenting, you are going to smell acetic acid all the way through. There is a legal limit to the amount of acetic acid that is allowed in wine. So do not accept fruit that smells like acetic acid. Okay? Sanitation. Clean your wineries. Use the appropriate cleaners and sanitizers. Don't just assume something's clean because it looks clean. Okay? You should really, I would estimate 50% of the wine work in your winery is going to be on cleaning. It's a massive part of protecting your wines. SO2, use the appropriate SO2. Especially for the pH of your wine. Limit oxygen exposure, okay, whether that means fill your tanks up or have your tank lids, and check your tank lids. But yes, limit that oxygen exposure. Do analysis, do sensory. Easy peasy to do sensory on a regular basis. The one thing I also want to talk, these faults, as well as a lot of SO2 and whatnot, we have fact sheets on them. If you go to the ISU extension store and type in wine, lots of different resources are going to come up, and they're really good to keep in your winery, in your little lab, if in a binder. And then if you start to get any of these issues, pull it out and see what needs to be done, and call us. That's also always on the table. Okay, last one of the last things I wanted to talk about was cellar palette. What is it? It's when employees become normalized to the wine at their winery. So they might not be sensitive to a specific fault, or not even that, not even the fault, but it's good to know what wines are being made around you. Okay. If you become complacent and you could be doing all the right things, and you might have the best wines out there. And I hope that for everybody. But the only way we're gonna know how our wines and is to taste other things. Okay. So I highly recommend visiting other wineries. I know there's a couple wineries in Iowa that do some employee tasting trips during the maybe the down seasons, and they take their employees to other wineries, taste the wines, and it's kind of a social team building as well. But they're also going out tasting what the Crescents might taste like, Edelweisses, Briannas, Marquettes, to give themselves a good um, help them build their sensory perception in their own wineries. Attend tastings. So we do tastings. We have our workshop. We have our round tables, especially as winemakers. I highly recommend coming to those round tables. We have some really great discussion. We talk about what remedies we have for certain things or what products we're using. And yeah, we really get into the nitty gritty of winemaking while we taste as a group. And attend conferences. I put this as a separate because I think there's a lot of merit, not just on the networking side and the education side, but most of the time, all of the conferences I've been to in the Midwest have some sort of social event where you can taste all these wines and you could see what other Marquettes taste like, what other, Frontenacs taste like, and start to build up that appreciation and experience so that when you go back and taste your own wines, you may be able to say, I'm sitting really good. Or you may say, ooh, need to tweak that, need to fix that part of it. So sensory evaluation requires lifelong learning and practicing. I taste wines on a regular basis, whether it be at home, whether it be here at work. I have the fortunate opportunity to taste a lot of things here at my job. But I'm continuously learning and I'm continuously looking for opportunities to go and try other things, try new things. The wine shop in town has has classes for different regions around the world. And I like to go to those just to keep learning and practicing because it does take practice. I used to have a terrible sense of smell. And I used to always think I can't smell anything. And then I got into wine and I realized, okay, I've got to work at this. And it takes some time, but it does take practice. And I would highly recommend doing it as a team in your winery. If you're a small winery, get your tasting room team involved and do some sensory sensory activities. So to wrap up, what I would say is use your sensory skills often. Okay, take them home with you. You don't need to become obsessive or anything like that, but when you're cooking at home, smell all your ingredients separately. Things like that. Just try and put it into little bits and pieces in your everyday life. Practice often. And GMPs, so good manufacturing practices to prevent those faults, using that SO2 appropriately, preventing oxygen exposure, sanitation, using clean fruit, all of those things. Chances are we're all going to run into issues at one point or another. Okay. And don't let that, hinder progress or anything like that. But if you are thoughtful about your winemaking and how to prevent those faults and use your sensory evaluation early as a preventative measure, you'll have better success rates, let's say, with your wines. And good wines are going to sell well with consumers. Okay. In the long run, it is a very important and good business decision to make unfaulted wines, because your consumers they'll pick it out. They will pick it out. And they won't know why. They won't know why what's wrong. But they will know something is wrong. Okay, that's me and I feel like I was soapboxing a lot today. But we're going to jump into our discussion. Remember, we're going to turn off the recording for discussion. That way we can talk a little bit more freely and we can find out how you're using sensory evaluation in your wineries. But I do want to point out a couple things. In May, this has been a topic requested several times. So Randall Voss is going to be with us, and he's going to talk about potassium in the vineyard. And I think that's a really good time as the growing season is kicking off. June 2nd, we're going to have tasting room training tips with Sarah Pirtle. Sarah's working on a really great fact sheet that wineries can use when training their tasting room staff. And that's a really good time as well, as the busy season is starting to ramp up. And sometime in late July, we'll have our tasting workshop. So be on the lookout on our website when that date, or our newsletter, that date will get released. By the end of April, this newsletter will definitely have a date for that. So look out for that. And May is going to be Iowa Wine Month. So yeah, I hope your wineries are planning, if you're in Iowa, planning some cool events around that to celebrate Iowa Wine Month. And reach out anytime. Myself, Sarah, Drew in the lab, we're all happy to try and help and answer whatever questions you guys all may have.